Hey guys! So today you and I are going to talk about junior developers and code monkeys. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, how do you separate a junior developer with a code monkey type of developer? Well, I would say that I think that this term is something that we need to define a little bit first and foremost. So you're also pointing out one thing here. What would you say quantifies a junior or up to mid-level, not in title but in attitude and aptitude and so forth? So guys, let's just do this again, because I'm probably never gonna get to the end of answering this question for the internet, because it's just one of those questions that will forever be here. It's never going to go away. It's the same thing as what is a relevant programming language to learn in 2001, 2002, 2000. It doesn't matter. It's always going to be there. So when I have a few terms that I use on a regular basis, both here and when I talk to like people within with my work and so forth and so forth. So the more normal terms, skill levels that I usually refer to is you're a junior, mid-level, senior. Those are the things that practically everybody in the industry can agree on are known terms. Then I have terms that I use with my coworkers, or like that what we talk about. I use the term bootcamp level developer, which is enormously sensitive for some people, because they believe that when I say bootcamp level developer, I mean that if you are self-taught, or that it's a derogatory term for being self-taught, which it's not, because it has nothing to do with being self-taught. And then I have CodeMonkey, which is another one, which actually is not mine by the by. CodeMonkey, I heard that lovely term on Borderlands 3, or is it 2? I think so, yes. That is the term that Handsome Jack gets called by his boss before he becomes handsome. Yes, so you know. That's where that reference is from. That's the only reason I know that term. Anywho, and then you have like architects and so forth, and these things that gets a little bit more fluffy. So let's break it down first and foremost. Let's talk about the normal terms. Junior, mid, and senior. So these are on average terms that most of the industry will agree on. Like, I will give you some rough numbers and some rough definitions here. It's not going to be perfect, guys, but it's going to be on average what you can expect that the industry will define it as. And I can base that on quite a lot of years of experience, quite a lot of interviews, like so forth and so on. Of course, it's just my opinion at the end of the day, so you have to, like, if you trust my opinion or my definition, go with that, or go with somebody else's definition. But on average, I've seen these things to be true. Junior level, first and foremost. That basically means that you are a person who can produce code with assistance. In other words, you know the basics of the technology that you're working with, so you can like make something happen and you can produce some type of results within the workspace, but nobody's going to expect you to be able to do it like on your own and so forth. You usually require assistance to ship. Let's say you might need help once or twice a day in the beginning at the minimum, and more depending on situations and so forth, and you're going to be that person for quite a while. It basically is the case that we can't just leave you to your own devices, because you're going to need to be able to ask people and like get assistance and so forth on a fairly regular basis. That doesn't, there's no magic number like, oh, you ask for help one time or two times or 5 times a day. That is not how it works. It basically just works. It's just a way for us to define that yes, you're not completely autonomous. Everybody needs help once in a while, guys, but at junior level is usually someone who needs it on a fairly regular basis, and there's no shame in that. I always tell people that there's no shame, guys, in asking for help. You are a junior software developer. All you should know is that at some point people will start to raise their expectations on you, so becoming autonomous is something that you should make a goal. And we usually say that this is where you are when you have between 0 to 3 years of experience. Then we have mid-levels. A mid-level is on average it's the quote-unquote the perfect unit of a software developer. It's just an individual who can produce pretty much, like, they know their stack fairly well. They know how to ship stories and do work and so forth without a lot of assistance. You don't really have to supervise them. They just need to know what to do and so forth and so forth. And they also ask for help sometimes. Nobody's going to know what your password is for login credentials are to the database or whatever you're doing, right? But or that there's a specifically complicated bug or something like that. Everybody always needs help with something. Nobody's a master of everything. But on average, they can just, you can go on summer vacation and trust that stuff is going to get shipped if they are alone. That's the sort of individual. This is where you are at about 1 to 5 years, or for the rest of your career, depending on your aptitude and like how you push it and so forth. The thing that is different here now is that I have another term that I will touch on this a little bit as well, because that touches on senior. So senior is by most companies, like standard here, just an individual where we say, quote unquote, you have extensive work experience. The problem with that term is that basically can mean minimum is usually plus 4 years minimum on average. 5 years, something like that. It can be even higher than that. It's very difficult to define that thing, because that's basically everything that, when you're quote unquote good enough, or you've worked for long enough, you're basically a mid-level with a lot of work experience. That's what we're talking about. That's the bare bone minimum most people will expect from a senior. The problem with that term, as I've mentioned before, is that it doesn't really say much about you as an individual, whether or not you're actually able to produce at the highest levels of software development. And so we've invented new terms. So what I have a term that I call true senior. And what a true senior is, by my definition, has nothing to do with that you have more than 4 years of experience, which might be the norm for quite a lot of companies. Because as I've said to you guys before, the difference in coding level of a mid-level and a senior by today's standards is almost laughable. The range can vary so enormously that you have no idea. Like a really good senior, as I call them, a true senior, they are the sort of people that we are today calling principal engineers or staff engineers. So like we invent new terms. So it's just transitioning like to higher levels of skill and more granular levels of skill. And I think that these things are a little bit silly, because basically to me you're just inventing new terms for something that basically means you know everything so well that we can basically give you any job that we need. You need someone to take charge of. You can get, as I like to say, a true senior is an insurance policy. It is the individual that you hire to make sure that everything works and that the project gets delivered and so forth and so forth. It's the sort of person that you want to be in charge, because they know everything. They've done the journey several times. They have tons of work experience. They have tons of technology and stuff like that, right? But as I said, for most people, a senior is just a mid-level software developer who has worked for a certain amount of years. Now, when I talk about a code monkey, that has nothing to do with your seniority level. You can be a code monkey when you're a junior level, mid-level, senior, or like you can't become, in my opinion, like you cannot be a true senior if you're a code monkey, but that's just my opinion, of course. But the code monkey term that I use is just a way for you, it's a mindset. That has to do with your personal aptitude for software development, your intelligence level, and of course your attitude towards the work that you do. A code monkey is an individual who needs to be spoon-fed everything that they do, because they can't really think in a larger perspective themselves. They are the people who basically, if you give them a task, they will do that task, and they might be really good at that task, but they won't actually figure out that actually, you know what, this thing isn't really the thing we're supposed to be shipping. These are the sort of people you go into combat mode with over what the specification is telling them, because to them the problem isn't that the code isn't working. The problem is that they did the thing you told them, and now you're upset because you told them something and they did exactly that, and it's still not working. When you might, especially as a customer or a manager, sort of expect that, yeah, I didn't feel like I had to tell you this thing. It feels fairly obvious. It's sort of like if you hire a security guard and in the contract it says they should alert on any sign of like physical entry or something, and then the whole your building burns down, and they go, well, my contract just tells me to call you if somebody's trying to break in. That's the sort of like the idiocy we're talking about. That's a code monkey. It's a person who will just spit out code. Like, they won't actually try. Usually they're not so concerned with doing a good job. They're more concerned with just doing what they're told without actually thinking for themselves or anything like that. And then lastly, bootcamp level developer. A bootcamp level developer. Me who is sitting here talking, I am a bootcamp level developer if we're talking about machine learning. Because all I've ever done with machine learning is to take a bootcamp. I have a very, very shallow understanding of that concept. I might be a senior in something, but I might be a bootcamp level developer in another thing. So when I talk about bootcamp level developers, I'm not talking about being self-taught. I'm talking about that your skill level within this thing, like you have no work experience, you've done some basic product, you haven't really tried anything serious with it or anything like that, you're done like the bare, but you're basically through the tutorial that you had on like some online course or something. That's a bootcamp level developer. These are the people that I usually refer to when I say that this is a bootcamp level developer, or they have a bootcamp level understanding of this thing. It's not a derogatory term per se, depending on how, I mean, then, you know, being ignorant could be a derogatory term if you wanted it to be, or like incompetent and so forth. I mean, it's not a nice thing to tell anybody, but in some cases we're talking about something that I don't really know. My vocabulary is limited. How would you say it in any other way? Someone who knows very, very, very little about something. So what I want you to take away from this is that this distinction that you usually find, the terminology, is junior level developer. You know the basics, and you can, with some help, get your stores through the door. Usually 0 to like less than 1 year up to 3 years of experience is the average range where people will put you if you have that skill level. Mid-level developer, quote unquote, the perfect unit, like the bare minimum that everybody's looking for, is 1 to 5 years of work experience, has fairly good understanding, and can ship like code within their stack. They may not be master level developers who've been working in tons of different projects with different technologies and stuff like that, but they know how to get stuff to happen at the very least. Senior is basically a mid-level with more than 4 years, or like more than 5 years. We're talking about a person who's usually, like on average, you can think about it as 5 years to 8 years or something like that. If you want to go higher than that and you want to be a staff engineer or a principal engineer or CTO or whatever like that, you're talking about 8 10 years, something like that. That's for the average. And then in those situations, you're usually expected to not just know how to code in a specific stack. And that can vary as well, depending on what we talk about when we talk about seniority. But basically it comes down to you get to a point where people don't care anymore about you just knowing how to code. They want you to literally own the whole thing. Like, you need to know the cloud providers, you need to know how to ship software, lead teams, and do all the other stuff, like the million billion things that you need to know, which is what I refer to as a true senior, because that's my term at the very least. Because you can endlessly just invent new titles for something, but at some point I think that the industry just has to agree on that. This ecosystem is so vast and so complicated that at some point you just need a term for an individual who has worked in many different projects with many different types of modern tools and basically can get stuff to happen regardless of where you put them. They will always be able, like as I said, they're an insurance policy. To me, that is a true senior software developer. For most people, a senior is just a mid-level with a certain amount of years, and we have a very hard time agreeing on what that actually means. And then finally, Code Monkey. Don't have to worry about being a Code Monkey. If you really like your job and you make sure that you continuously study and you try to look out for code improvements and Boy Scouting, and you actually care about learning your domain so that you understand the business and you actually write the right code and not just the code that you think that you should be writing, that's a very bad thing for you. Code monkeys, as I said, these are guys and girls who basically are just there to do what they're told. They're usually more about money or like convenience and things like that. They don't really have a flair for software development, and they usually struggle with larger perspectives and stuff like that. You can give them a story and that might get done, but you cannot trust that they will be able to figure out if that's the right way of solving the problem or not. And you can't trust them to look over your code quality and make sure that you have all the right checks and balances and stuff like that. They're not leaders or anything like that. They're just executors, and usually not the sort of people you want to be in charge. And then finally, bootcamp level developers. I was a bootcamp level developer when I started. I took my first JavaScript course. I'd taken a bootcamp. When I took my first Python course, I was fully convinced that I was a computer scientist, at least a junior level computer scientist. So if I refer to a bootcamp level developer, guys, don't sweat it. It has nothing to do with being self-taught. Some of the best software developers that I know are self-taught. It's just a term that refers to the fact that you have basically just completed the ABCs of that topic. Have a great day.